Windfall by Julian Manthorne. Thump, thump. I slapped the steel wall of the green garbage truck. When it slowed to a stop, me and the new guy, I think his name was Dan or possibly Dave, jumped off. I helped him throw the bags in the crusher, clear bags only, and told him to pick out the eligible pieces from a small stack of cheap furniture that had been left at the curb. There was a medium-sized tabby cat named Francis wheeling around the legs of a child's desk, and I leaned down to pet him. His owner, Mr. Stenworth, was tailing behind, taking it easy on his new hip. "Morning, Mr. Stenworth," I said, giving him a wave. Dan had finished loading in the furniture and came over to greet the cat. "Hey, Jason. Last day, isn't it?" Mr. Stenworth asked. "Sure is." "Enjoy it while you can," he laughed. "Would you like to celebrate with us? Molly's having a little bash for me at the Retro Daisy." "I'll put it in my book," he said. "Is it on the 21st? "Yeah, around 7. Thump, thump. Ivan, our driver, clapped the outside of his door, and the message was clear. "Hurry up." "Well, I'll see you around," Mr. Stenworth said, with a wave to Dan and me. "Come along, Francis." Dan walked back to the truck, and after checking that no one had climbed into the yawning mouth of death, pressed the green crush button on the remote. I had trained him well over the last 2 weeks, or so I thought. I was not watching Dan. Instead, I was looking after Mr. Stenworth, who had wobbled on his first 2 steps, but seemed to be steadying as he gained forward momentum. I only turned to the truck after the squealing sound of metal on metal began. I wasn't concerned at first. There's lots of noises that come out of a trash truck, and not all of them are good. But when I saw the crusher fail to close and heard the clunk, clunk, clunk of the machinery grinding against itself, I threw myself at the remote and mashed the red stop button. The jaws released slowly, and I saw immediately what the problem was. Dan, or possibly Dave, had loaded a metal baby carriage in there and had gotten jammed between the press and the sidewall of the truck. I pulled on a plastic wheel and got a sheer tangle of metal. "This is not eligible for collection," I said seriously, holding it in front of his face. "Sorry," he said with a smirk. Was I this insolent at 25? I hope not. We climbed back onto the truck and drove into the alley, where Ivan could turn the truck off so we could safely pull the shit out of the mechanism. When we had it all cleared out, we tested the crusher. Ivan got the truck going, and Dan and I climbed on the back. There were some black trash bags heaped in a puddle further down the alleyway, and Ivan drove over them without even slowing down. Black bag trash was not our responsibility. As we passed, I saw something strange around the neck of one of the bags. Green paper. Thump, thump. I rapped the side of the truck. There was a screeching of the air brakes as Ivan decelerated it quickly. "What is it now?" he complained, but I paid no attention. Instead, I hopped off and inspected the black bags to find that yes, that really was paper money soaking up the gray puddle water. Dan came up beside me, his mouth hung open. We grabbed at the money like a baby snatching a fistful of their first birthday cake. He held it up to his face and smelled it, then stuffed it in his pocket and reached for more. "Hold up, kid, there's plenty for everybody. Help me tie these up and heave them into the cab," I said, stealing a glance at the mouth of the alley, praying that no one would come by. There were 4 bags, and we each took 2 and brought them up to the passenger side door. "Whoa, you're not putting trash in here," Ivan barked as we stuffed the bags under the dash. "This is special trash," Dan said, pulling some bills out of his pocket and waving them at Ivan. Our driver frowned, snatched one out of his hand, and held it up to the sun. "Can't be real," he said. "Not a chance." "Let's go back to the garage and check it out," I said. "No," he said, and put the truck in gear. "I know where we need to go." 20 minutes later, we were sitting in what Ivan's wife called the front room, while all around us, tiny bonsai trees perched on thin maple shelves, and pink and blue Japanese lanterns hung from braided red and gold strings. I sat on the very edge of the couch, trying to make as little contact as possible with her nice furniture, while being painfully aware of how long it had been since I had last washed my uniform. Ivan's wife, a short and serious woman named Bonita, inspected one of the bills with her set of monocular magnifying rings. "They're the real deal, I'm 99% sure," she said, putting her spectacles down on the table and handing Dan back his bill. "When are you going to turn it in?" she asked, looking at each of us. We squirmed. "Well, Bonnie," Ivan started, and she smiled. "I'm joking. Why take a crumb when you can have the whole loaf?" Ivan laughed, the deep belly laugh of someone who had recently lost all of their worries. Dan was slouched on the couch next to me, blissed out. We divided the money up right there in Ivan's front room, including the bills that Dan had snatched. In the end, it worked out to a little less than $120,000, all in $100 bills, no less. Benita took Ivan's sum and told us she was putting it in the safe. She offered Dan and I some manila envelopes for our portions and told us to spend carefully, inconspicuously, and we both agreed. A fool and his money are soon parted, as the Bible says, and any statistician will tell you the same. Odds are, when a person comes into a large windfall of money, they will get into some trouble and lose it, one way or another. In Dan's case, coming into 120 G's meant a lifelong party. His friends were more than happy to drink and smoke and snort right through his riches, plus an extra 40 grand into debt. A month later, his parents got robbed in their house by 2 of his debtors. 2 weeks after that, he was found dead on the side of the highway, 260 miles from Higgin Valley. Ivan and I followed his case closely, keeping our money hidden and our doors locked. I never even told Molly about the find. Instead, I bought a box safe with a big Mastercraft logo on the front, the kind that looks just like a toolbox, and I put the envelope inside, covering it with back issues of sports car and motorcycle magazines. Ivan did the same, and for a long time we were both in the clear. A year later, Ivan's faithful car broke down, and he used his stash to buy a new car. Nothing flashy, just a used Silverado. The police arrested him a week later, suspecting that he was an accomplice for some fraud scheme that had never even been on the news. He told them the truth, minus my involvement, and they were almost ready to let him go when his DNA came back as a match for an old counterfeiting case that he and his wife had been involved in 15 years before. Ivan pled guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence and financial support for his wife while he was in prison. I didn't visit him for a long time in order to keep suspicions low, but he was often in my thoughts as I hung the laundry out on the line, or stacked preserves in the cellar, or helped my wife walk across the room from one chair to another. A week after my 60th birthday, I made an appointment and went to the prison to speak with him. I sat down in a steel chair that was bolted to the floor and put my hands, palm side down, on the blue counter. An officer directed me to pick up a black telephone receiver that was covered in a nest of scratches. I picked it up gingerly as my former coworker took the seat across from me. He was wearing gray sweatpants and a white t-shirt. "Hey," I said as he picked up the other receiver. "Hey, Jason." He sounded tired. "How are you holding up?" "Pretty good," he said, but winced as he tried to sit up straighter. "Not great, actually. They've moved my release up to May 8th. "That's good news," I said. He grimaced. "Yeah," he said without much enthusiasm. "How's Molly?" "About the same. We hired a person to come over and do physio with her every day. Some college girl who lives just down the street. She tells me to join in when they're doing exercises." I laughed. "Do you?" he asked. "Sometimes I do. Other times I say, 'Who, me?' Yeah, she always laughs at that." "Sounds nice," he said. "How's Bonita?" "She's okay. Stays with her sister now in Cedarville. 2 old widows, or soon to be, in a tiny shack that my brother-in-law built back when a building permit was a once-over by someone who took a wiring course in community college," he said. "Is it drafty?" I asked. "It's an old place. It needs a new roof and windows, and that's just a start," he said, sighing. "I could look at it," I offered. Never mind that the last time I swung a hammer was in the year that started with 19. He gave me a thin smirk, the kind you give a man who is 10 years your senior when he offers to do physical work. I was getting that look more and more lately. "Don't worry about the house, Jason. But you ought to swing by and see Bonita, especially after, he said, and I did know. Rap, rap. There was a knock on the door behind me that meant it was time for me to wrap it up. "I've got to go, Ivan, but I wanted to say thank you." I stopped, wondering if we were being recorded. Anxiety crept through my body, and I feared that the very words I said next, or worse, the few that I had already said, could lock me away for the rest of my life. "For everything. You're a great friend, Ivan. I know if Molly were here, she would say the same." I saw a glint in his eye, but he didn't break down. A cop opened the door to retrieve him. "Thanks, man. Take care of yourself, okay?" "Okay," I said, but he was already hanging up and being escorted away. A month later, I dropped a white envelope through the mail slot at Benita's place in Cedarville. It was stuffed with 20s.